We're joined by Pradeep Bhaskaran. I'm going to invite Pradeep, Joe, and Hein to the stage. Pradeep Bhaskaran is the head of HR for EMEA, APAC, and Latin America for Cognizant. As an American, I congratulate you on the decision to stay out of my continent. But he's got all Cognizant. Cognizant is a technology service provider that has 50,000 plus employees. Joe Mosley is the HR director from a little bit of a different part of the world. She's the HR director for the Salvation Army, which does an incredible job of providing social services as a nonprofit, partially supported by government, also partially supported by free will donation and giving, and a great, by the way, cause for your corporations to support or volunteer for. Hein Knappen is the CHRO for ING Bank, based here in Amsterdam. So he had a grueling overland journey of about, 2 kilometers to get here.
Exactly.
That's great personal expense. He's been able to arrive. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world of strategy. Each of them comes from a different part of, the world of organizational commerce, all its different stages of organizational development. ING, a company with a rich history. Cognizant, a relatively young organization. The Salvation Army with a very different mission. So it'd be interesting to hear the different perspectives of the group. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to put this question to Pradeep, because you're the technology guy. And then we'll go to 2 other people. So HR is facing an increasingly changing world. We've all talked about this. There's an increasing use of workforce automation. All right, and we see it in places we don't even think about. I was giving an example the other day. You go into a restaurant, and instead of having a server, you get an iPad, and you put out your order, and then just someone buses the food to your table, right? There's all kinds of places where workforce automation is taking place, and it's reducing and changing the kinds of jobs that exist within organizations. So Pradeep, to start, as you look at the workforce automation that's taking place, which, by the way, your company is complicit with, because you're actually designing the software to do that, is it going to change HR for the better, for the worse? It's not going to change at all. How do you think workforce automation impacts HR?
Hey, thanks, Elliot. I think to start off with, I'll take a step back, right? I think all of us very clearly recognize that we're living in a VUCA world. Anybody knows the full form of VUCA, by the way, in the audience? Cool, yeah? Go for it. Hey, thanks, yeah, and ambiguous, right? So we clearly are in a VUCA world, right? A lot of disruption around us. The amount of disruption, at least I see within HR, within the markets in the last 3 years, has been unprecedented. And I just want to give you a quick background before I actually answer the question. I think traditionally, HR has been the custodian of documents. Then we moved on to take on HR business partner role. We've been shouting, saying that we need a seat at the table. And finally, I think we have a seat in the table, right? Today, because of so much of disruption happening internally as well as externally, from an HR standpoint, I think a lot of business leaders, and I'm sure all of you are experiencing that in your corporations, right? They're looking at people leaders to guide them through this disruption, right? That's the kind of disruption which we are seeing. And if we don't take that opportunity, I think we might lose it to the technology folks who are advising. Typically, HR is reported into the CFOs of the world. Today, I feel that there are hardly any brick and mortar companies left, right? Everybody is moving into the technology space. And if you look at the World Economic Forum, I think every company today is rebranding themselves as a technology company. I saw MasterCard, which is a credit card company, rebranding themselves as a technology company. That's the kind of change, which we are seeing. And to handle that kind of disruption, I recall that a couple of years back when we used to have our budget, sessions, we used to, discuss with our CFO on the employee versus HR ratio. And I'm sure all of us still do that. But today, with the kind of complexity, that ratio is not relevant anymore. The only way we will be able to tackle this disruption is with the use of technology. For better or worse is not the question, but that's the future. So if you look at the evolution of HR, all of us started off handling the administration part of HR. We evolved to a HR business partner role. And today, the competency of HR folks will also dramatically change, right? All of us need to be design thinkers. We need to understand human behavior much more. And I would like to give you an analogy, connect to the analogy of Uber, right? Today, if you look at the Uber app, right, there are close to about 3 million drivers across the globe, right? And if you look at the app is something which controls their lives, right? What time they start working, what time they end. The app is responsible for their dopamine shots, right? When they get this surcharge, I'm sure the drivers must be feeling very excited about it, right? The app is responsible for their bonuses. It's responsible to make sure they work within the labor laws of various countries. Of course, that's debatable, considering a couple of countries have banned them, but that's the future. And if I look at the world of Cognizant, close to 260,000 associates across the globe. In GGM, or the global growth markets, I'm responsible for close to about 60,000 associates. The only way we can manage them is by using technology, right? That's a couple of thoughts, Elliot.
Hein, what do you think? You're in a financial services firm that's heavily technology oriented.
Absolutely, and to Pradeep's point, our CEO would call us a technology company with a bank license. So your point is to the point, Pradeep. I think if you look at automation, everything that happens, first and foremost, over the last 40 years, free trade and automation have elevated 1 billion people out of dirt poverty. So we shouldn't fall in the trap of thinking that automation and digitization will come at the cost of employment. It probably won't. It will be very different employment, that's where the challenge sits. But if you look within companies, what I think the first result, the first impact of automation, digitization will be the quality of the remaining work will improve. It's a sort of augmentation rather than it may take out work, but what's left will be higher quality. And so there will be a greater need for management to steer current performance and future performance. And in my thinking, what we are as HR professionals first and foremost for is enhanced leadership capability, providing leadership the instruments, the tooling to drive today's performance and tomorrow's performance. With job augmentation and increasing level of education of employees, that will become a greater challenge, but it will also be a great opportunity for more impact of the HR function. That's what I think.
Hey, absolutely great point, Hein. Before Elliot, you ask the next question. The other example which I have is the automotive industry, right? If you look at the automotive industry, it went through a lot of disruption 10 to 15 years back, and everybody predicted that number of folks who will be working in the automotive industry will dramatically reduce. But if you look at the analysis today, you would find that the number of workers have only increased, but their skill sets and competency have dramatically changed. I know there is a group of HR professionals who feel that automation, robotics, will maybe disrupt the HR world and number of HR professionals will reduce. But on the contrary, I feel to handle this disruption, number of HR professionals will only increase, but their competency will dramatically change, right? As I mentioned earlier, we'll be responsible for design thinking, we'll be responsible to advise businesses how to motivate associates. I mean, and the kind of disruption is crazy, right? You're looking at flexible working hours, people, in our corporations, represent various generations, right? The millennials, the generation X, Y, Z, their needs are very different, right? And to handle that disruption, right, again, I think it's very, very important that HR folks focus on what will their role, competency, and skill set be 3 to 5 years down the line and start moving, maybe towards that, right?
So let me bring this back to people. Quick intro to the question. We have a pharmacy chain in the United States called CVS, all right? And I was in there, I put my credit card in the machine to pay for a purchase, and the credit card, when it had finished processing, made a sound that sounded it was like, to tell me to pull the card out. And I was thinking to myself, as I was being barked at by this little tiny card reader, did anyone own the responsibility to think about how the machines were interacting with the people? How unpleasant that sound was and that experience as a customer. So let me go to Joe and say, all right, so as we get into this world of increasing automation, okay, what additional responsibilities should HR have to think about how the workforce is orienting with the robotic or machine-oriented? How does HR get into that conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, certainly from my team's point of view, the whole of my shared services team are away on training today around increased levels of customer support and service, because I sort of see, as we automate more of what we do as a HR directorate, I'm able to invest in people to make sure that they are making the user experience so much better. We have 4,500 employees across the UK and 1,500 ministers of the church. Really varying level of technical capability. So we're having to support people who are very tech savvy, lots of millennials who want all of this, down to treasurers, 80-year-old volunteer treasurers in a local church who haven't got a smartphone. So to try and encompass all of that, we've got to make sure the user experience we provide as a HR function is second to none, and actually bringing people through on that journey and how we support them. And I think we've got a real opportunity to show the added value people can bring, and how we can make our service so much better as a result of that. I want to excite people across our organisation about actually getting rid of some of the things that they don't need to be spending their time on and concentrating on people, which is at the centre of the organisation, and what they do want to spend time on, and making sure that experience isn't scary, because I think for a lot of people it is quite scary, and just making sure they feel part of it, that they're upskilled, that they're involved and they know what they're doing, and use that excitement, use and build on that and the possibilities it brings.
So, great point. Hayne, how do you feel, since it was a banking machine that barked at me and you're in the banking industry? So how are you wrestling with that question of what should HR's role be?
Yeah, Elliot, I would think let's first start up living up to our current responsibilities. I'm not sure we always do. We often, and I'm sure you agree, historically we've often stepped into management responsibility when management abdicated from their own responsibility, particularly in difficult conversations and the less tangible issues. That has given us hardly any credit. And so in my own thinking, what we are for is two things. When it's about people services, which could also sit elsewhere, where first and foremost should create a differentiating employee experience, making full use of all automation we can deploy. On the other hand, for the HR business partners, would be enhancing management capability. So it would be driving the capability of managers to lead their business. And then, as much as I sympathize with you about that machine that was barking on you, that's not my responsibility. Sorry, that's really for management.
That's what the girl at CVS said. Yeah. So, let's take it to the context as we look at, and what I'm really trying to do is explore the boundaries of HR as we face robotic automation. There's another trend. There are a number of outsourcing companies, some of them are here today, that will sell an entire workforce to provide a function. So instead of going to a company and saying, I need to hire 2,000 employees, you'd go to them and say, I need people to pick and pack products that are being shipped. Or it may be the companies that are cleaning your offices at night. What role does HR have about the treatment of workers in your building by contractors, right? So they might be reporting to one of your organizations every day, but they're one of these companies that sells results, right? So they'll sell permanent shipped or something like that. So Pradeep, what do you think, as you look at these companies, what should your HR oversight be for people in your building who might not actually be cognizant employees, but are interacting with your employees as part of the culture?
It's a great question, Elliot, right? So I think one thing we clearly need to recognize as HR professionals is that contingent workers is going to be the future, right? If you look at analysis, right, today I think in most of the developed countries, about 8% to 10% are contingent workers. By 2020, that is going to change to about 25%, right? One thing we clearly need to recognize is that the three-stage life is over, right? Wherein you had a period when you studied, you worked, and then you retired. Because of the change in technology, because of so much of disruption around us, I think the future is going to be continuous learning, which means that at any point of time, you would have a certain population in the societies which you live in who have taken breaks to go and study and then come back. And they can maybe do that piece of work for maybe 1, 2, or 3 years and then go back to study and then come back, right? So 3-stage life is over. There's analysis which predicts that an average employee will see 7 to 8 career changes, that is full career changes in their life, in their working lives of about 50 to 70 years, right? On top of that, average life is going up, right? From the average, 87 years, which is currently in Japan, I think a millennial has a good shot to hit about 110 years. Having said that, what I'm trying to say is that a contingent worker will have a lot of opportunities available to him or her, right? At any point, they could have 3 to 4 multiple opportunities available for them to join. There's HR professionals of future who are custodians of culture, who will be responsible for these contingent workers to come into their corporation, plug in, and then go back to their studying and then come back. The ease of them doing operations, right? And I think as HR leaders, you will be responsible to define what your company stands for from a culture standpoint, from the ease of working standpoint. And that's a big responsibility, because as I mentioned earlier, a contingent worker could have 3 to 5 job opportunities in front of them. Why should they choose our corporation? Right? It's a big, big responsibility on HR leaders like us to make sure that we are ready to embrace those contingent workers. Today, I think most of us do not even focus on in the working environment of contingent workers. And primarily because some of the countries in Europe, there are strict labor laws. It's only that much we can do for contingent workers. But I see that changing dramatically as we go away from a 3-stage life to maybe 7 or 8-stage average ages going up. There'll be a big, big reliance on contingent workers who will have that niche skill and who are ready to work on the technology or that part of the business where your existing workforce cannot handle, right? So I think HR professionals will be required to design systems, technology, the ecosystem in which a contingent worker will be required to work. Because finally, I think from a compensation standpoint, these companies where these contingent workers have opportunities to work with, that compensation is going to remain somewhere in a particular band. So why a contingent worker is going to choose your corporation will depend on the ease through which him or her can do business with them and it can come back because of the experiences they have had working for your corporation.
Hey, and I know you use outsourcing services a lot, even in HR.
Yeah.
As part of it, how do you feel about the responsibility for HR over
Yeah.
these workforces?
So I like Pradeep's perspective, and I would add one, which is, I'm not saying we're always living up to this, but if people are essential for delivery on your strategy and your purpose, then it's totally irrelevant of whether those people are on your payroll or not. So and that's probably an artificial distinction we've always made. That was convenient as long as contingent workers were just a small sliver of the total population. But I would think I could think of no argument why we wouldn't apply all our values, all our policy and practices on those that are contingent workers. I can see many practical difficulties, but it's essentially those are people that contribute to the company creating value. So there's no reason to treat them in the way of dealing with them, treat them differently from people on our payroll. So I'm not challenging the point from Pradeep, I'm just adding yet another perspective.
Yeah, and I want to demonstrate the difference between the commercial world and the nonprofit world. Joe, who's responsible for the treatment of volunteers that work for the Salvation Army?
Salvation Army.
And HR, right?
Yeah,
So you own that,
absolutely.
right? It's very
Yeah.
clear, it's very easy. They're technically a form of contingent worker. They're volunteers. They're not on your payroll, but it firmly sits in her responsibility.
But it's interesting, actually, that often contingent workers, agency workers come under procurement in a lot of charities, as it's seen as a definite contractual. And I've been doing a lot of work very closely with procurement to say, actually, we need to set the cultural values that we're recruiting to. So we're still having that influence, because actually, within the charity world, and I've had experience in other charities where this has happened, people see your name, and it is so important to us that they see the values live through that name, no matter who that worker is. They don't differentiate whether they're employed by the Salvation Army, whether they're volunteering for the Salvation Army, or they're an agency worker for them. They just see that name, and how we still recruit to values, that we still manage to values. And actually, if that person may have the best skills in the world, but if they don't live within our ethos and values, then we shouldn't have them as part of the organisation. And that can be a really difficult battle, especially areas where we really struggle for talent, like finance. We have ongoing issues in IT. But actually, we've had to set that bar incredibly high.
Well, talk to Pradeep. He's right next to you. I mean, I can put you guys on the same stage. I can't make you work together. So what I'm trying to do here is explore some of the areas that I think are the subject of great debates that we have to have inside the HR community about the role of HR. And this thing of people that work in your building, to Haynes' point, they are helping advance your message. They're critical to your strategy. Do they have your values? Those are important. But let's talk about one other area as we talk about values. So there's a lot of discussion about the multi-generational workforce. How many of you are tired of talking about the multi-generational workforce? Okay, I know I am, all right? All right, and at this point I've figured out that I'm in way the wrong generation when they talk about it, right? I'm sort of like yesterday's news. But there is a persistent theme, and we have a lot of research we've done at Shared Expertise about engaging millennial workers using social purpose and social impact messaging. So let's talk a little bit about what you've done within your organizations. Joe, what have you done? I mean, you're in that business. Talk about how you use the messaging about social purpose to engage the millennials and workers.
Absolutely. I actually found, I've only been in the Salvation Army 14 months, and I actually found that a lot of the work that happened at our headquarters was seen as quite separate to what we did out in the field. This incredible work that's going on, but actually you could walk into our head office and it could be a bank or a building society. Yeah. We weren't engaging people within that building with what we do. So one of the big things that we've done is bring in that anybody coming and joining us, spending time with our frontline workers, go and spend a night at a hostel helping and supporting, go and spend time with our anti-human trafficking and modern slavery units, go and see what's actually happening. And that's made such a difference, even in my own team. They'd never really left headquarters. Well, I let them go home, but apart from that, they'd not actually experienced what we do. And what a difference, how much more engaged they've been coming into that environment. But the other thing that I've done, particularly with the HR team and this millennial thing, I have lots of colleagues who are really worried about them. They're always on their phone. They're always messaging each other. It's during the workday. So we actually have just put that on its head slightly. We use Workplace, the sort of work Facebook app. We put on there what we wanted to do, our big 6 areas of HR planning and strategy. And we got all of the people, no matter what role they're doing, they upload ideas, they go in and share around the plans, they message each other about things that they could be involved with. So those 6 areas, we have everybody within the HR directorate commenting, putting pictures up, little messages. So it's part of, we've used what is the Facebook culture and actually built on that to make them really feel part of, this is our purpose, this is where we want to get to within the people strategy. How am I going to be a part of that? And it's worked so incredibly well. We had to fight a lot of battles to get that to happen. IT were really scared about having Workplace available. I think they thought all our secrets of our planning would be on there and people would be, no one's that interested in what we're going to do around, management development. But anyway, but it's worked so incredibly well. And I'm now showcasing that, and more departments are going, actually, we could do that. That's a really good way of engaging people.
So I know, Hayne, you've used social messaging a lot in developing the culture. And just to let you know, everyone on the stage has been an award winner. Pradeep Bhaskaran won last night for CHRO of the Year in the for-profit area. Hayne won for the Sustainable Workforce Award for really galvanizing the workforce. And Jo has previously won when she was running talent a few years ago for Guide Dogs for the Blind before you went to Salvation Army. So they've all been recognized through our HRO Today's, sort of prior winners who are actually do the votes by their colleagues. So Hayne, you've actually done this. You've actually created behaviors that include social responsibility as part of the code of ethics of the company. Yeah. How has that been successful for you, highlighting social purpose?
Yeah, so, and when you started asking about millennials, is that right? You just still want me to answer that? Yeah. Or since I think the generation thing is totally exaggerated. I see it in my own children, how to say, they used to be very purpose-driven. I'm not saying they stopped being purpose-driven, but my son is now expecting his first baby, and he gets his first mortgage, and suddenly things change in life, and of course they do. So I think it's rather life stage than generation, and what you see happening is sort of amplified way in the younger generation. You also see happening in the older generation. So I think we're just mistaking trends that land better with youngsters than with older people. We're mistaking that for a generation effect. But leave that aside. What we've done at ING, when we launched our new strategy a few years ago, the CEO said, we have to do something with our values. It's just about what he said. And then we had a conversation where I finally achieved to convince him that it's all nice to talk values, but it's a very long way from a value to a behavior, and it's behaviors that matter. So we said, let's just identify behaviors that help us and identify those that don't help us. And then, more or less in line with the culture at ING, we engaged in an exercise that in the end, I think involved about 30,000 employees. We are a 52,000 employee company. It was all around the two questions. In view of the new strategy, what behaviors do you think will help? And what behaviors you think won't help? We were afraid because we thought retail bankers would give very different answer from wholesale bankers. Not so. So after a lot of word processing and wordsmithing, we got to 3 behaviors with many, many examples of what they pertain to and what they do not pertain to, that people would feel this is the essence of ING. And then if you would make a step back, you would see that this is for roughly 2/3 great legacy and for 1/3 ambition. And that feels about all right, because you know and I know you don't change culture. You try to if you want to be successful in changing behavior, you have to be, that's the lesson I've learned, be effusively grateful about the legacy and be almost surgically precise about what you want to change. So the success of the Orange Code, as we have dubbed it, has totally surprised us. We knew we were on something, but I'm totally surprised. It's just being quoted everywhere as part of our performance management. And I think the secret is it's in everyday language, so it's not difficult. It's very tangible, and it's a nice balance between what we're good at and what we want to be better at. That's probably hindsight what the success pertains to.
All
Add
right.
something to that.
Yes, go ahead.
I think so. Just in response to what Hein had mentioned, right, that the difference is exaggerated. I agree, but I think what is happening is, if you compare with our lives, at least most of us, in this room, 15, 20 years, see, a lot of workplaces used to be the bed where a lot of innovation used to happen, right? Hotbed where a lot of innovation used to happen. Workplaces were very exciting, right? That's where we had access to great technology, great systems. All our friends were in the workplace. But if you look at the ecosystem today in the societies which we operate and what the millennials are exposed to, their external world in the society is much more exciting than what they see in work locations. And that's a challenge which companies like Cognizant are going through, right? They have the best of social media. They have access to great forms of communication. They get their dopamine shots through Twitter, WhatsApp, or, Snapchat. I may not be even, there are a lot of messaging systems where we don't have access to, right? So the world which they live in outside the work environment seems to be much more exciting than work locations. So one of the biggest challenges which companies like Cognizant have, where already close to 50% of our workforce is millennials, is how do we make these work location as exciting, if not more, than they work externally. And I don't have an answer to this. Most of us still struggling for this answer. And we, from a Cognizant standpoint, have decided to engage with these millennials to find these answers, right? So we have created millennial committees spanning across countries, right? And our CEO, Frank, actually sits with them once. When I say sits with them, it's a virtually. We have close to about 70 millennials, representing countries, representing accounts, projects spread across the globe. Our CEO actually spends close to an hour with them discussing what are the issues which are there in the mind and how to solve them. Because Cognizant, just like any other corporation, I mean, we are close to about 25 years old, 260,000 associates. We are somewhere between entrepreneurship and bureaucracy. And the only way to cut through that is to expose these millennials to the guy who holds answer or who can make a change, immediate change within the corporation, right? And through that, we also make sure that the other thing is about what Joe mentioned, right, as to how do you handle these committees and make sure that these millennials can act with a sense of purpose, right? And one thing what we have done is we have these millennial committees who are very passionate about a particular cause, and then they're able to drive that on their own, right? We don't require any external stimulus or influence because they're very passionate about a particular subject or a particular purpose, and we give them the tools to achieve what they have set out for. That's something else which we do, Joe Hein, right?
So thank you for playing into my next question. All right, so if HR owns these important aspects of workplace culture like employee volunteer programs, employee donation programs, community impact or community outreach programs, should HR own the corporate responsibility function? Pradeep, what do you think?
I think once as I mentioned earlier, Elliot, right? I mean, from what I've experienced, in Cognizant, once you're able to engage with a set of individuals, be it millennials or spanning across gender, once they're passionate about a particular project, it does not matter where that department, if it's corporate social responsibility, it doesn't matter whether it sits with HR or with business. If you have a set of passionate individuals who are aligned to a particular cause, who are aligned to a particular purpose, I think from an organization standpoint, we just need to give them the tools to help them deliver those results, right? So, but I think what HR will need to stimulate is those 5 or 6 individuals or the committee which can take on that cause or purpose and drive towards that. But finally, from my perspective, it doesn't matter where it sits. From a Cognizant standpoint, corporate social responsibility is a completely, it's a separate department. In fact, there's a separate sub-company within Cognizant which drives that. They do reach out to HR professionals across the globe, taking the help to set those committees, but after which the committee relies on their passion, direction which they get within themselves.
Joe, what do you think? Should HR own corporate responsibility?
I would hate to see it as a HR imposed responsibility, because I think if we're not taking ownership within the different directorates, it will just seem as that's something HR want you to do. It's a fluffy thing. I don't think it is a fluffy thing. It actually drives performance. It makes a difference. It increases engagement levels. It reduces attrition. It's hard and fast, a great way of engaging with your employees. So, but what we do in HR is often set the policy around it. We're often the ones that will say, yes, it is okay to take up to 3 days to do things a year. And we can also showcase and show our own best practice around it. But also I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we're sharing case studies, we're sharing results, so that that other leaders in the organisation will see the actual value of it. But I think if we own and impose it, it won't have the take-up as actually people seeing what the tangible outcomes are and that they actually can have such a difference in their teams. And it's actually often quite surprising teams. Our property team now gets everyone in their workforce to spend 3 days supporting various causes within the Salvation Army, and has had such a if I'd have told them they had to do that, they wouldn't have wanted to do it, but because they've seen tangible results and they're driving it, it's great and they love it, and they're now sharing that good practice elsewhere. So I think we have a responsibility, but let's not just impose it, let's make sure people are taking their own ownership.
So, Hein, you're wearing your orange tie today. So you're branded as ING's CHRO. So what do you think? I know it's a big part of your culture.
Yes, I don't think this particular HR responsibility. I concur with Joe's points. You can, in your company, it is the very core of your existence. That is, by the way, I admire how you drive that, because the way you have to deploy means is so different from a commercial company. I just wouldn't know how to do that. So I really admire that. But I don't think the HR, in my own thinking, we're here to enhance management capability, to create greater leaders. And insofar as we're involved in people services, we should rather make it such that it delivers a differentiating employee experience, because that builds engagement. And I personally don't see, so I can see myself having, as a corporate citizen, being responsible for greater purposes, but I don't see a particular responsibility for the HR team.
All right, so that's an area where we all agreed maybe HR should have a say, but not necessarily ownership.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about technology. All right, it's a critical component of all HR programs and communication. But we know, and we will have a study that we're releasing this afternoon on what's called, or later this week, I guess, on what we call the innovation gap, which is we looked at what practitioners want from technology and what they feel they're getting. And we also asked the technology companies if they feel HR is using technology appropriately. And there's a gap between the opinions of the two groups, if you will. So technology is critical to all HR programs and communication, but they don't always align. So there's millions wasted in development costs where features are created that HR just won't use.
Yep.
So what I'm interested in is what's the one question that you wish, I'm going to go to everyone on this, the HR technology creators, the providers would ask you before embarking on the development of new software for HR. So Pradeep, I'll start with you because chances are the people in your shop are actually creating HR technology and not asking, so I wanted to do that for you, man.
Right. Really, I think one of the biggest trap as HR or any other department, the biggest trap which we fall in is that when we design technology, when technology companies come to us and ask for specification, we take the departmental requirements, right? For example, let's say we're introducing a new HR technology in Cognizant. I see that it's a bunch of 5 or 6 senior HR professionals who are deciding on that. I think what we should do more and more is that to involve folks who will actually use that technology. We see from a department standpoint, we try and design technology for ease of our operations, but I think it's time we look at the end customer in mind, which is our employee, right? And maybe ask a set of employees as to how it will affect their experiences or lives. I think that's a disconnect. I think slowly we are getting there. We are, I think things are changing around us. I mean, technology is moving from the back end, to the front end, right? I mean, if you look at about 5 to 6 years back, technology was clearly at the back end, right? You had the CIOs of the world who are taking decisions. They were responsible for technology decisions, but we are seeing, at least in our world, where CMOs and CEOs are taking more decisions on behalf of the end customer. And I think if you look at the life, 5 to 6 years back, when things went wrong from a technology standpoint, the CIO or the technology guy used to go in and do a e-learning course for a day or two, and that's it. But today, when technology goes wrong, the CIO, if not the CEO, loses their jobs, right? So it's high time, I think, we get the end customer, which is the employee, while designing HR solution as to what do they want, how does their experience be more enhanced than what they currently find in it.
Joe, what do you think? What's the one question you wish they asked?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the one question for me would be around, I think a lot of people making the decisions and the design around this are very desk-based people. The majority of my workforce don't sit at a desk at all. They're out and about. They have very limited access to technology. So when they come to use something, it's so different than the majority of people who are sat in headquarters and are used to using this equipment. So actually go out and spend some time with the people, as you say, on the front line who have very, very limited time, may just have a very small portion of their day. They can go and check in and do what they need to do. And when it goes wrong then it really goes wrong. And for me, it's using that user experience. And you said earlier, Pradeep, that I think there is such a disconnect now between people's technology experience at home and out and about than when they come into the workplace. It has shifted completely the other way. you know, I'm at home, I can get an Uber, I can order my food, I can FaceTime my relatives abroad really, really easily. I get in the office, our video conferencing stuff doesn't work properly. It takes me hours to get into it. I'm trying to do my expenses on an app that's just not user-friendly. You know, the whole thing has changed, and we have got to start making that disconnect easier. It should be an environment that is easy and usable, and for some reason we've got that incredibly badly wrong at the moment. So for me, it's look at what the users really need.
Hein, how about you?
So I think Pradeep is totally right, and I think Joe is totally right. But before that, there is another question, and that's a question I think we have to ask for every initiative we deploy, and we often don't ask. What company value does this create in the longer term? And I think, in my experience, I could make a separate presentation or a series about all my failures in my career, and they often had to do with losing the line of sight between my initiative and company value creation, because that is what gives you credibility. And so often we get lost in technology that doesn't add any value. It's just hobby horsing. So, and then still, you're right, and Pradeep is right as well. But before that, there is this fundamental question: is this just a hobby, or is it going to create value for the company?
Yeah.
Anyone have a question? All right, we have one back there. We have one up here.
Good morning. Sorry, it's James from Seven Step. Put up with my voice for a moment. A theme for me that I've heard is you could describe it as almost the death of the physical office. When we talk about the strides in technology, the Gen Z, the millennial generation, and some of the constraints come with the history of organisations having physical offices and physical HQs. What's the panel's view on where that's going to go in the next 5 to 10 years, whether actually that is something that needs to be looked at? Had
you asked me 5 years ago, I would have probably agreed. I no longer agree. If you look at, for instance, this enormous fashion that I'm a bit critical about of agile work, which requires teams being together, and which I've seen in my own company, unleashes a desire in people to be together. So we're back to physical offices without individual offices and individual rooms, and with a much more creative use. And I can totally see your point that it's a much more differentiated picture than there used to be. As I stand now, I don't believe anymore in the death of a physical office. Curious to get your views.
Yeah, this is really apt for me at the moment because we're just redesigning a new THQ, territorial headquarters, to be built, and I'm looking at this is obviously very front of mind. I'm working with the architects at the moment. I think there's going to be a real blend. What I want there to be is the opportunity for teams to come together and work together, but also the opportunity to flex and how inclusive that can make our workforce, because we can much more fish around people's caring responsibilities, life responsibilities. So how do we get a really good blend of the two? What I'm amazed at actually is that I looked at this at a previous organisation about 10 years ago and did a lot of research, and I thought 10 years on there'll be loads more about this, there'll be some really good stuff. Actually, we haven't moved on that far, and we're still battling with the same things. And I've been talking to HRDs at other organisations that have done moves and have got it really, really wrong, have thought, actually, yes, we're just going to have touchdown point offices and we're not, everyone together, and it's gone badly wrong. So I think this is a real area for us to be looking at, and how we get that right. So we give flexibility, but purpose and teamwork and a blend of the two. So it's a blended option I'm looking for.
Good points, Joe and Hein, right? But I think I kind of agree. I think it's going to be the death of physical office in the near future because technology is going to destroy that. I mean, not destroy that. It's going to make... so today, if you look at I think yesterday somebody presented those slides, right? I think unemployment levels are at all-time low, right? If you look at any country in the globe today, unemployment levels are less than 5%. Technology is dramatically changing, right? The amount of technology, the innovation which happened in the entire year of 2000, today happens every 3 days. And by 2020, every hour will see the amount of technological innovation which happened in the entire year of 2000. On one side, you have unemployment levels which are lowering. At other side, you have so much of disruption happening around us. I think technology is going to harness the power of collective, right? It does not matter in which building you sit. It does not matter in which country you sit. I think technology is going to help a particular candidate with a particular skill set log in into a system, and the system is going to or use the skill sets and competency which that particular individual has, irrespective of where he or she is physically located, right? And I think that's a dramatic shift which is going to happen, whether we like it or not. We have to be prepared for that. And I think, as Joe and Heidi mentioned, maybe physical spaces will still be used when you meet up maybe once in a year or once in 3 months. But I think that physical space is going to be replaced by the virtual world, where it will not matter meeting up physically or not. Those virtual worlds will still help you being connected 24/7. But I mean, as I say, today we have so many forms of communication, right? I mean, but we sometimes forget to communicate, right? But so I think so if you remember to communicate, if you remember to be connected, I think the physical it will not matter whether we have a physical world, because I think the technology in the virtual world will enable us to be connected 24/7.
We can take one more quick question. Heike?
We said a little bit earlier that the ratio of FTE versus HR professional is kind of out. I would really be interested in your views on how do you size your HR teams to keep up with the challenges that you have?
So it would be annual HR cost per employee, I think. That is a very practical measure, and you can compare yourself very well. And what I'm experiencing, we're in a big HR transformation. We're taking out very many people. We'll increase this ratio seriously, while increasing our impact as well. So what I'm seeing is, I don't know where that ends, but what I'm seeing is you can go a long way in taking out cost of the system and enhancing capability of who are left, and focusing much more on what really helps to create value. So I'm not sure whether that answers your question, but that's the thinking that is, for me, underlying.
All right, we need to tie it up there. One of the things that, you're talking about HR cost per employee, you'd expect a banker guy to do that, say, we can measure that, right? But one of the things, we talk about employees, we talk about candidates, we talk about selling candidates on coming to work at our organizations. I had this conversation last night with Greg Barber from AGS and some of his colleagues. And we talk about employees and having to sell them the retention, which is, now we've sold you on coming to work, everyone to sell you and continue working here. How would your view of technology and messaging and HR services change if, instead of using the word candidate or employee, you actually called them what they are, customers? And you said, we want to be a customer-centric HR group. You actually thought of whether they're candidates or employees, customers. Because your companies spend a bloody fortune on figuring out what the customer wants. Do they think the same thing about the people who are their internal customers? I'm going to leave it there. What a great panel. I want to thank Pradeep Bhaskaran, head of HR for Cognizant, Latin America, APAC, and EMEA. Hein Knappen, the CHRO of ING, and Joe Mosley, the HR Director for the Salvation Army UK and Ireland. Thank you. Big round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.